The public has a long-held fascination with detectives. Detectives see a side of life the average person is never exposed to. In this podcast series, I Catch Killers with Gary Jubilant, I'll be interviewing a whole range of people you come across as a detective, including police, bad guys and victims. I spent 34 years as a cop. For 25 of those years I was catching killers. That's what I did for a living. I was a homicide detective. I'm no longer just interviewing bad guys. Instead, I'm taking the public into the world in which I operated. The guests I selected have amazing stories from all sides of the law. The interviews are raw and honest, just like the world they inhabited. No one who steps into the world of crime comes out unchanged. Join me now while I take you into this world. This episode of I Catch Killers contains conversations that some listeners may find confronting or triggering. Discretion is advised. Welcome back to part 4 of I Catch Killers with our guest Bernie Matthews. We've never gone into part 4 on I Catch Killers, but I'm not going to let an opportunity like this pass. As a cop, I spent my whole career chasing criminals. I'm finding it fascinating sitting down with Bernie and talking about things from his perspective. See, Bernie is an ex-prisoner, armed robber, escapee, journalist, writer and prison activist that has seen the worst and the best of worlds from inside and out. He is also a very good communicator that can get his point across. Let's get into part 4 of I Catch Killers with Bernie Matthews. We're going to cover a lot in this last hour, including the infamous Parramatta Jail Tunnel, homebrew in prisons, and Bernie's career change into journalism. Again, a listener warning is advised. Today's content will be heavy and confronting. We've talked about your experiences in prison and the brutality, and even if it wasn't the brutality, being separated from your loved ones, that type of thing. Coping mechanisms, and I'm a couple of things, and you've mentioned in there at one stage you were doing yoga and got into some meditation.
Yeah.
Talk me through that, because and in saying that, it's only become at sort of recent times. A lot of what's a tough guy or a hard ass doing yoga, but you're seeing it more and more. You see it with the special forces guys, and people like yourself. So talk me through that.
Yeah, how that all started, as I said, they injured me back at Grafton in 73, and I was at Maitland, and I was having a bit of a complaint about the back, pains and that down the sciatic nerve. And this bloke, he said, "Bern," he said, "have you tried yoga?" I said, "Fucking, I'm not going to try that shit. Sitting cross-legged watching the wall all day." He said, "No." He said, have you tried?" I said, "No." He said, and he gave me this book. It was a little yellow covered book. He said, "have a look." Yeah, all right. So I took it upstairs. I threw it on the shelf, and I forgot about it for about a week. And I thought, and he reminded me one day. He said, "Have you had a look at that book?" I said, no, I'll have a look at it in a couple of days. Anyway, one night I got it down and I started reading it. And the cobra, the locust, yeah, okay, I'll try them. I'll just see how it goes, because it was all for me back.
Yeah.
They were all back exercises. So I started doing it, and I felt the relief. And then I got into the meditation side of it and started studying myself and looking inside myself, and fucking, this is all right. And then that's how it progressed. Just progress from there. And it became a religion. Well, not a religion as in religion, but it became a part of my lifestyle for a long time. And I got out, and then I sort of dropped it for a while, and every now and again I pick it back up. I go and meditate. I still do the breathing exercises.
Yeah.
And I find that's very calming. It's like if you're angry and that, you do your 5 in, hold for 5 and 5 out. If you get that rhythm, you start slowing down a bit.
It's amazing the impact it can have.
Yeah,
just
it
little
is.
Adjustments like that. It seems so simple. But,
and it is. It's, you've hit it right in the head. It's so simple, and you don't really realise. Back in the 70s, I had this view of a guru sitting on a mountain, cross-legged, trying to find, the truth of the world. I wasn't going to get into that shit. But once I got rid of all the preconceptions about it and started looking at it, I found a whole new world.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I'm interested because I do that as well, and the way that you described it then, that's how I feel that I use it myself. That you don't have to do it all the time, but it's a tool there that you can use when you need it.
That's
So
exactly
I know
right.
if I'm pissed off or angry, and one part of me might say I want to go hit something. The other part, well, maybe the best thing for you is just stop, get your breathing happening, and start to slow yourself down.
See, most of my anger I've sort of internalised. I've like kept it in me and put a lid on it.
Yeah.
That sort of releases it slowly. You
Yeah.
know, so it's not like a poison going through my body. You know.
Yeah. Oh, that's good that you found that. Well, that's one benefit that
Yeah.
you've got from the life that you lived. There's some funny sides of, and when we were talking offline, the sense of humour that you guys have, and I've seen it in the police, and I've seen you liaise with an old mate from your world, and it was like listening to it was like listening to two old cops talk,
Yeah.
and that same sort of black humour, and it's funny, but I think that is a coping mechanism that people need to use if they experience trauma and see trauma.
Yeah. Well, see, these days that's all gone. These days, crime. I think I said this before. It's a wealth culture, and it's directed by drugs or the drug trade. And you've got all these people that class themselves as gangsters, and all they really are people that have seen an opportunity to make money out of a commodity, which is drugs. They're not armed robbers. They're not safe blowers. They're not criminals, as in criminals. That's a generation gone. I'd say that myself and the bloke that you're talking about before, we're dinosaurs of an old age, of another era. We're gone.
Last of the gunslingers.
Well,
literally.
yeah, literally, yeah. And the modern era, and even the police, they're geared towards confiscation of assets, entrapment. But there's no such law as entrapment in Australia, but entrapment per se, the drug trade, drugs, armed robbery, you never hear that anymore. Very rarely.
Yeah.
Safe blowing, that's gone. Breaking in, junkies have done that. Car stealing, they've gone for a joyride, or now it's hijacking, carjacking.
Well, there was a pecking order in the prisons, wasn't it?
There was.
Your time. There were the stick-up blokes. There was the break-and-enter guys. And talk us through that, the way that the jails were sort of divided up in the yards.
Well, you had, I guess, a culture, social structure. You call it what you want.
Yeah.
At the top would be, I guess, the main men in organised crime, and I don't mean the people that never went to jail. I'm talking about people that were working in organised. We're not talking about drugs. We're talking about organised crime. Then next on the ladder would be the armed robbers, safe blowers, then armed robbers. So, you could take your pick there. Midnight spares, which is ripping off cars and reselling them. The break and enter merchants that were breaking into like factories and stuff like that, or stealing truckloads of stuff. It comes all the way down to the little busman, which is a break and enter man.
Yeah.
That would basically be the scale, the social scale, I guess. In the prisons, yeah.
Yeah.
There's one. You just reminded me of something, really. You just reminded me of a funny story.
Yeah.
I was at Parramatta Jail, and out of Parramatta Jail there was an oval, and you could go out in the oval and play. And I had to see a bloke, and he worked in the mechanic shop. Now they had a mechanic shop there, on the oval, which was set apart from the oval. It was a section all by itself, and the screws wagons and cars and that used to get overhauled in the mechanic shop. And of course, if a screw had something wrong with his car, you get a foreigner or done, and they'd wheel it in there. Anyway, I had to go and see this bloke one day, and I've gone around here. Well, the mechanic shop, and there was no screw working on the weekend. The crims had it all to themselves. Yeah. Anyway, I've walked in there this day, and it's quiet as a mouse. There's not a sound. I thought, I wonder where everyone is. And there was another section out the back, so I've slid the door open, and all of a sudden there's a flurry. And I've gone, what the? And then I realised. I said, it's Bernie. Said, come in. What do you want? And I've looked around, and what they were doing is they had a safe. And they were practising with a thermal lance, how to use a thermal lance. And I've gone,
big on the tech.
Yeah. It was full on. It was high school of the fucking prison system.
I wondered about the thermal lances because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a skill thing.
Yeah.
You can really fuck things up.
And when you see it, you know, you go, what's that? Like, what's that? Look, it's this, it's that.
Yeah.
Well,
And
you know, I didn't want to ask too many questions.
This is a weak part of the safe. This is
yeah. Well, as it
yeah.
turned out, there was a couple of robberies that went down a couple of years later, and I often wonder whether it was the same crew, but that's got nothing to do with me. It's not my business. But the point was, funny things like that happened all the time.
Yeah.
And when people saw it, it never got anywhere.
Yeah.
It was just closed mouth. You know,
Yeah.
it was just, you know, and like you're hearing about it half a century later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
The prison brew.
Yeah, home brew.
And like you're not giving away trade secrets
No,
because
no.
everyone knows about it. But what type of stuff do they make it from?
Well, Freddie Arbecker was the best home brew maker in Parramatta Jail. He used to make it out of pineapple pieces.
Yeah.
You get the tins of pine, like everyone toss in and get the big tin. Or if we could steal them from the kitchen, we'd steal the big tins.
Yeah.
And of course, that was cost effective. You go in there, steal them, bang, you've got all the home brew. And what he used to do is he'd feed it every 2 days. He'd feed it with a bit of sugar, a bit of yeast.
Yeah.
And there was a bakehouse next door, so you could get the yeast from the bakehouse. And he'd get it bubbling, and he put it up in the schoolroom, up in the roof of the schoolroom. And he used to get up there once every 3 days and feed it. It was the best brew in the jail. It was one cup of it puts you on your ass. But it was really, it had an unbelievable taste, sweet taste, beautiful. I've never drank a brew like it.
And was there a special time where you could have a drink? When was
Yeah,
the
well,
time?
what used to happen?
How did it play out?
Yeah, what used to happen?
Because I would imagine you wouldn't want the whole everyone on the piss at the same time.
No, well, there was a problem there. There was a big Kiwi bloke. He wasn't a bad bloke. He was a lifer. And when he got pissed, it took 6 screws to hold him down. He just wanted to take on everyone.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And, of course, you had to be careful if he got on the soup, because if he got into a stink, they knew he was on the piss. And if he was on the piss, they'd want to know where the piss came from. So it sort of snowballed.
And there was almost, I won't say a blind eye, I'm not going to cast aspersions, but there was an acceptance that if you did it and it didn't blow up in anyone's face, everyone's happy.
Yeah. And that used to happen of a Saturday afternoon over in One Wing. Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, you know, usually on the weekend. And
so that would give you something to look forward to, I would imagine. So it's a weekend.
Yeah. And you have a couple of snorts. You'd be in a good mood. You go on a muster. Yeah, yes sir, no sir. 3 bags full. Go to your cell. I lock you in your cell. You have a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, great. You know, no dramas, no hassles. Everybody's happy. Even the screws knew what was going on.
Yeah.
But, you know, because there was no drama, they just let it go. And most of the blokes were old crims, and most of them were ex-tracks.
Yeah.
So, you know, they knew how to, you know,
behave themselves when they needed to.
Keep everything under wraps.
Environment.
Yeah.
So you recommend some of it?
Yeah, it's not too bad.
There was also a bit of a racket going the SP bookie deal.
Yeah, what happened there?
And there was a rule that only one SP operator per prison or wing or however it broke up.
You only had one in Parramatta. You only had one bookie.
Yep.
Anyway, at the time, Arthur Loveday was the bookie. He was the SP bookie. But Arthur was in the tracks. He was in the circle. He tried to escape. I think he tried to escape from Parramatta. Anyway, he was in the circle for a while, but he was still running the book from the circle. And Shipley was his runner. Well, I was over in One Wing, and a couple of blokes wanted to put on bets.
Yep.
I said, oh yeah. He said, you know, for a packet of tobacco, White Ox. I said, all right. I said, I'll see Shipley. So I went over to see Steve. He said, no. He said, Arthur doesn't want any tobacco. He only wants cash bets.
Yeah.
I thought, oh yeah, okay.
Because what tobacco was a currency in prison anyway, wasn't it?
Cash was a better currency.
Yeah,
okay.
Know?
And of course, you know, if you got cash, if you get the opportunity to run away, well, you've got money to. You can't run away with a bag full of White Ox.
You can rip your throat out. It's rough stuff.
So I sort of figured, you know, that's why he wanted cash. Anyway, I said to Shipley, well, what about these blokes who want to put on the weed bets? He said, well, you'll have to talk to Arthur. I said, all right. So I went around the circle. I talked through the air vent, you know, the vent through the cell. I said, listen, Artie. I said, look, there's blokes who want to put on tobacco bets. What do you want to do with them? He said, I don't want them, mate. I said, well, listen. I said, can I have the tobacco book? Can I start up a tobacco book, just tobacco only? He said, yeah, you can. So I got the imprimatur from the bookie.
Yeah.
And he said, but you get any cash bets, they got to come to me. I said, sweet. I'll give them straight to Shipley, and you've
Yeah.
got your cash bets. So that was the ball game. So I ended up with the tobacco book, and well, I did better on the White Ox book than he did on the cash book. I was just making money hand over
And
fist.
what were you betting on? Was it all the
Horses, trots,
races?
races, trots, whatever they wanted to bet on.
And again, that would potentially relieve
Tension.
tension within something to look forward to.
Yeah. So you had at Parramatta, you had the football games. Well, that got rid of a lot of aggression. You're playing touch football out in the oval.
Yep.
Then you had the poker games in the yard. You had the SP books. You had the money book and the tobacco book. So yeah, but Parramatta was a hive of activity. Everybody seemed to be doing something. Like blokes were making tables and sending them out to their family. Blokes were making chess sets and sending them out. It was just a little hive of activity.
You even organised concerts.
Yeah.
Talk us through that, the concerts that you...
What happened there was a bloke called Crawford. He had connections with, Albert's Productions, and they were the managers of the Easy Beats and what was the other crew? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Anyway, he wanted to get a couple of concerts going inside the jail. So he saw Duff. He said, "Look, this would be good for tension. It'll ease a lot of tension. Got rock concerts going on in the jail. How do you feel about it?" He said, "All right." He said, "The first sign of trouble," he said, "it's all off." He said, "But it's on you." So he started a prisoners concert committee.
Because they had that type of stuff over in the US with Johnny Cash, didn't
That's
he?
right, in Folsom and San Quentin, yeah. But here, now, no way in the world. No way in the world. Anyway, he started a concert committee, and I got roped into it because I was the editor of Contact, so I had to sort of keep it newsworthy for the blokes in the jail. And he ended up getting some bands in. And then he arranged with Albert's Productions and the ABC and a couple of us to start or to do what Cash done in San Quentin, but to do an album inside Parramatta Jail, and they called it Canned Rock. And there was a lot of preparation for that. There was a lot of organisation, a hell of a lot of bands came in, but I got off the ground.
Yeah.
And it ended up getting produced. It was a pretty big thing. That was in '79.
And that would again would relieve that tension.
Of course,
Simmers in the prison,
and it gives the blokes a sense of worthwhile, a sense of, okay, look, I'm doing something positive sitting in this bastard of a joint.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Now there's the story from Parramatta, and I think it's a classic, and it reminds me of a World War II, prisoner of war movie. But the tunnel in Parramatta, there's some funny parts to it too, and
some sad parts too. Yeah.
Sad parts. The a reporter reporting live from there. So weave that into your story. But tell us the story of Parramatta, the Parramatta tunnel, without getting yourself into trouble or giving up trade secrets. No. But talk us through what's already publicly known.
What happened is that started in Cotingle. Strange as it may seem. Tony Lanigan was the architect of the tunnel. That's no secret. You know? Now, when Tony was in Cotingle, he said to a couple of us, "Mate, there's tunnels in Parramatta Jail." What? He said, "Yeah." He said, "There's tunnels." Now, he was a history fanatic, and he delved into old convict history. He said, under the jail in the old days, they used to have a tunnel that went from the jail to the governor's house across the road, which was a courthouse. And it's like Darlow quarter sessions where you come through the tunnels and up into the dock. Yeah. He said, "There's tunnels there." He said, "I know there's tunnels there." Oh, yeah, okay. Not everyone, but I guess the majority of us thought, if it's there, it's there. You know, sort of took it with a grain of salt. Well, anyway, he went to Parramatta. That would have been about 77. So, 76 or 77, because he was working on it for nearly 18 months. Anyway, the message came back, "It's there." Now, we didn't know what was there, whether it was a tunnel or what it was, you know. So when they shut the blockhouse, or shut Cotingle in 1978, as I said, we went to Parramatta, and we're all over in one wing. Well, Tony was in one wing, and his cell overlooked what turned out to be catacombs. You know, what had happened in the old days is they'd had another set of cell block underneath. So you had a three-tier cell, but in actual fact it was 4 tiers. But the 4th tier was under the ground. Now, nobody knew about it. Over the years, it sort of got forgotten. The plans got destroyed and just nobody knew. But Tony had realised that there was some sort of way of taking the prisoner from Parramatta Jail under the road to the house across the road, which was the courthouse. And, of course, he found it. So he dug through the floor of his cell and he fell into the cell block underneath, and they looked through the cell block and they found that they could go under the cell block to the edge. Then they had to dig under like a roadway, which was on the top, which led into the Parramatta Linen Service next door. Now, the Parramatta Linen Service, that was only used during the daytime. It was the guard towers weren't manned overnight or anything like that. So once you got in there, you could get something, go down to the far wall, go over the wall, and you're away.
Breaking it down, but Bernie, like digging a hole through the floor in his cell. How the hell do you do that?
No, well, let me tell you this. They had electrical cords, they had drills, they had electrical light, they had pine board, they had to shore up the... So, nothing's impossible.
The ingenuity of prisoners.
It's just a matter of finding stuff and stealing it.
So how do you get to work on the tunnel? Like, where shouldn't you be in your cell?
I just get off the tunnel for a minute. Taking you back to the ingenuity of a crim.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit, a side issue. There was a Kiwi crim there. I used to call him, Nutmeg Joe. Now, Nutmeg Joe, he loved nutmeg. Loved it. Used to hallucinate on it.
Yeah.
And of a weekend, he'd borrow a colour TV and he'd get nutmeg. And all night he'd sit there watching the test pattern on the ABC because of the colours. Now, Nutmeg Joe...
Psychedelic experience.
But Nutmeg Joe was unbelievable wood carver.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Carving teakies and all the rest of it. Well, he ran out of wood.
Yeah.
Right. So a bloke said, listen, I'll get you wood. I'll get you cedar. He said, oh, yeah. He said, but I want you to do me a couple of carving. Yeah, no problem. So I got him cedar. And I can get you some cedar too. The cedar was coming from the pews in the chapel. In the end, all they had was these plastic chairs. All the pews were gone. They all turned into those carvers. That's what I'm saying. The ingenuity of crims.
Sacrilege.
Yeah, well, yeah. I guess that's another way of looking at it. Yeah. But going back to the tunnel, the ingenuity's there because you're thinking all the time.
So I suppose with a lot of people in there, you've got a lot of skill set that people might be sitting on. So.
And you don't realise them until you really put into a place where you've got to, okay, what have I got? What can I use?
Yeah. So how long was the tunnel project? Probably.
Well, I'd estimate 18 months, at least 18 months.
It's probably quicker than the Cross City Tunnel in Sydney.
Yeah, but a lot of hard work, and a lot of blokes were involved in it. I was involved to a certain extent. I wasn't involved in the actual tunnel because I got invited. I said, mate, I haven't got long to go. This is 79. I'm going out. At the very least, I should be out next year, which was 1980.
And your code was, the fact that they've offered you the starting lineup, that they respect you enough, the ones doing the tunnel. But your code was you'll help them where you can.
Of course. But, and that was the same with all of us.
Yeah.
Like with me, one bloke gave me a two-way radio because I was on the 3rd level.
Yeah.
He said, Bern, can you do me a favour? He said, I'll be down in the tunnel.
Yeah.
He said, can you tell me, and this was of a night.
Yeah.
He said, can you tell me when the screws variate on the tower? Because the tower was right opposite my cell.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, right. I said, I'd done that for a couple of nights. To me, it was nothing. No, if I'd have got pinched with, I got pinched with contraband. I got pinched with a two-way radio I shouldn't have had. But, that's the way it was. That's the way it was with all of us.
Yeah.
It was, as you said, if you didn't want to get involved, that's fine. You got the option. But if you could help, you'd help.
Right.
That was it.
And how many people were going to go out through the tunnel?
Well, I'd say personal, at least 10, but I've heard anything up to 15, 16.
Right.
But at least 10.
Yeah.
At least.
And it came unstuck?
Yeah.
It came unstuck very close to when they were
going
that
go. Night.
Talk us through how it unstuck.
Yeah,
and just before you do, but like they were going that night, so everyone was aware. How do they get out of their cells?
Yeah, well, that was part of the plan.
They had that squared away.
Yeah, one of the sweepers. Yeah, they had a. One of the sweepers, his cellmate had keys
Right.
to the cell. So once he got out of that cell, he undoes all the cells on the bottom landing. And if he's got to go any other landing, well, he gets up to the other landing and lets him out. So you've got the majority of them on the bottom landing. And the key, he had the keys. Murphy had the keys. What Murphy did is he got
when
a
you
visit.
talk Murphy,
Michael Patrick Murphy.
Right, the neither copy.
Yeah. He had the keys. And what happened, because he was going.
Yeah.
And what happened is he got a visit, and we only found this out later, but he got a visit off, I must have been that day or that afternoon or that morning. And he said, look, have a car at the end of the PLS, which was further down from the jail, which was right down the other end. Have a car down there, I'm coming home. Anyway, she said, oh, yeah, okay, well, what do you want me to do? Well, he said, look, I'm going with all these blokes, and he named them. He said, if they kill someone on the way, he said, I don't want to be involved. So, I want to cut out by myself. That's why I want the car down. She said, yeah, all right. So the story goes, the girl's gone home to Mum. And she said to Mum, look, Mum, can you look after the kids tonight? I've got to go out. And, of course, Mum said, no, where are you going? Like, they're all kids, the usual mum sort of protectiveness. Anyway, she hammered away at the daughter for a while. And anyway, apparently the daughter buckled and said, oh, look, Mick's escaping. Well, Mum's rang the jail. And then there was a comedy of errors. Apparently she spoke to someone and said, look, there's a mass escape going to occur in your jail. It's going to be by a tunnel. Well, whoever answered the phone didn't believe it. Said, oh, yeah, okay, I thought it was a hoax. And left it at that. When she hasn't got a call back, apparently she's rang up again. And I think she got in touch with Duff. Well, I don't know whether he was half pissed or what was going on, but he sort of didn't believe it either, because they'd heard all these rumours in the jail about tunnels, and they ramped the place left, right and centre, and they never found anything. So they thought, oh, it's just another bullshit yarn. Well, he said, well, who's the prisoner? And she said, Michael Patrick Murphy. So it was dark, so it was about 7 o'clock when that all went down. Of course, we heard him coming into the wing. And, of course, we've all gone to the doors, so what's going on? Then they open up Humphreys' cell. Well, we know something's wrong. Then they take Murphy out. They go, uh-oh. They shut the cell, take Murphy out, he disappears. So he's gone for about a half an hour, but everyone's at the door, like everyone who knows what's going on, they're all at their doors watching and waiting to see what's going to happen. Well, of course, the screws come in, they go straight to Lanigan's cell, open the cell, wow. Not too hard to work out what's happened. Anyway, Lanigan's pinched. Billy Mundy spits his dummy and goes berserk because Billy was involved as well. And that's how it come undone.
How did the people that were been working on that for 18 months react?
Pissed off. Yeah. Very, very pissed off. But, couldn't voice any opinion, because then that made them culpable of being involved in the escape attempt. So, everyone just had to button their mouth and just say nothing. It changed the mood and the vibe of the prison? Yeah, it did. Especially amongst certain number of crims. Not the whole jail. The whole jail didn't have a clue what was going on. Yeah. But so with a tunnel being built, it was still a tight group that was aware what was going on. Yeah. Well, it never got outside that group. Yeah. And it's a shame, because I think that's what broke Tony Lanigan's spirit, because after that he became institutionalised, Tony. Then he escaped. He's disappeared off the map. Yeah. In the 1995, 96, he walked out of one of the jails. He's never been seen since. But yeah, he was a nice bloke, Tony. And it's just, what do you say? Yeah, it's just one of them things that happen. Yeah. But I guess the thing that really extends from the escape tunnel is Murphy. They protect him, they wipe his ass, they tuck him into bed as a goody two shoes, because he's helped them bring undone, one of the greatest escape attempts in New South Wales penal history. They put him to bed, they send him to a minimum security camp, they send him to Silverwater. He walks out of Silverwater on Boxing Day. 6 weeks later, Anita Cobb's dead. Yeah. What do you say? Yeah. My argument is, if they hadn't rewarded him, she'd be probably alive today, but who knows?
I know that it's a big thing with yourself about
informers
being rewarded and the damage that can be done.
Well, you like people. Look, I understand police need informants.
Yeah.
I understand. I've got no problems with that. That's part of policing.
Yeah.
But what they don't understand, and you've had the ICAC inquiry into the use of prison informers up in Queensland, which is a really, really strange scenario. In 1994, I wrote a feature article about a bloke called Leo Henderson. Now, Henderson was a pimp and he was just a nobody from Melbourne. He came up to Sydney. He was in the prison system here. He participated in the riot, earned a name for himself. Then he rolled over and became one of the New South Wales supergrasses. But no one was spared by him. Crims, coppers, anyone. He'd give up anyone.
Yeah.
Anyway, he goes to Queensland. Then he killed a girl at Burleigh Heads, and while a daughter or a baby was in the room next door. And I'm not saying that to make it any more macabre. That's the reality. And he gets convicted out. He gets sentenced to life imprisonment. And he starts mouthing off about police corruption in Queensland. Exactly the same thing he did in New South Wales. Okay, that's his bag. That's no problem. Anyway, a bloke, it was Dave Halpin. He said, "Look," he said, "do you know him?" I said, I know who you're talking about." He said, "Are you prepared to write an article?" I said, "Fucking oath." So I wrote an article about him. Look, he's an informer. If you want to believe what he says, that's your problem. But expect the ramifications. That was in 1994. Got published. Major feature article in the Bulletin, Gold Coast Bulletin. 1994, 2007. It was 2007 or 2008. It was one of those years. The Queensland Crime Commission's trying to chase me up. I'm thinking, what the fuck do they want me for?
What have I done?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm thinking, who are they? And the missus, I ended up in jail, and the missus came out and said, "Listen, the Queensland Crime and Misconduct Commission." I said, "What the fuck they want me for?" What they wanted is they wanted the copyright to that article so they could reproduce it on a report called Operation... what was the name of the operation? Anyway, it was a crime and misconduct report on Leo Henderson in Queensland. And what he'd been doing, is he'd been telling stories to armed hold-up squad up there, and he'd formed a liaison with the armed hold-up, with a group of armed hold-up squads. And what he was doing is, they'd tell him the banks that were robbed, he'd set up a bloke in jail, they'd claim the reward and split the reward. It all came undone.
Oh, no.
And they're saying, well, this bloke wrote an article about him 15 years ago, and you still didn't do anything about it. Now look what's happened. And I sort of felt pretty confident about that one.
Yeah. Jesus. I want to talk on your journalism, but let's just take it when you first got released after, what did you do, 11 years
11,
straight?
yeah.
What did it feel like?
So, Gary, can I get you to ask that question a bit more on mic? If that's okay?
Okay. Jeez, he's pushy.
Professional.
Oh, sorry. Let's talk about when you finally got out of prison. You'd been inside for 11 years. What was it like walking out a free man?
Strange. Well, it was really strange, really. I was supposed to get out at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. No, 10 o'clock, then they brought it back to 9 o'clock. Then they said you're getting released at 7 o'clock because they didn't want the media there.
Yeah.
That was their story. We don't want the media there. So, yeah, okay, all right. Then it came back to 6 o'clock. Then it came back to 4 o'clock in the morning. That was unheard of. So we're going to tip you out at 4 o'clock in the morning so there's no media waiting and you get a clean run. So, all right. So I had... I got my discharge papers and the screw walked me over to the gate. I'll never forget this. There's two shadows and I'm thinking, who are they? Consortant squad. Anyway, I walk out and said, "Bernie," "Yeah?" He said, "We're from the consortant squad. Commissioner sent us out to tell you, listen, we know you're getting out." "Oh, fucking leave me alone." And, that was my introduction to the outside world.
Right. So the cops...
this ain't gonna end well. But, they didn't give me a hard time.
Yeah.
And from there on, it was just a matter of trying to settle in, Gary,
And what are the things that you notice walking out a free man? Like, what it must have overloaded on senses.
Well, when I went to jail back then, a schooner was 15 cents.
Yeah.
A loaf of bread, 20 cents. Just stupid little things.
Yeah.
Stupid. But,
You came out and tried to buy a schooner for 20 cents or 15 cents.
They look at you.
Yeah.
So me and a lot of other blokes do the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know about now. I still have a tendency to do it. If I go into a pub and I'm with you, say, for example, it's my shout, I'll pull out, if the biggest note I got in my wallet is a $100 note, I'll pull that out for 2 schooners.
Yeah.
Simply because I don't know what the price of a schooner is, and I'm not going to make a fool of myself giving you a $5 bill and saying, well, where's the rest of it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, there's stupid little things like that nobody takes into account, but, they're things that hit you hard, and they're things that you say, shit, look at look at everything I've missed out on, you know?
Yeah. So the journalism path.
Yep.
And you talked us through in the previous episodes about how you started to find the contact, and you worked out that you could string 2 words together, and that was a bit of a release writing, and you wrote those 2 plays. You end up getting awards for journalism.
Yeah, well, it was really weird. Well, it wasn't weird. I guess it's another string to me bow, for want of a better word. What happened is, as I said, Don at Chisholm in Katingal, Ann Summers at Parramatta. Then I met a guy called David Halpin on the Gold Coast. I was living up on the Gold Coast in the early 90s. And David gave me a kickstart with the Gold Coast Bulletin. He was the union rep there, as it turns out. And David was a Walkley Award-winning journalist from Sydney. And he was the one that gave me the job on Henderson, because Henderson was supposed to be an ex-boxer or whatever the case may be. And he said, what's his true story? I said, well, he's an informer. Anyway, David gave me an introduction to a guy called Fane Weaver, who was the weekend editor of the Weekend Bulletin, of the Weekend Magazine, and Russell Dooley. They were the 3 journos. They sort of gave me a leg up the ladder, the 3 of them. But David was like me. He was, I guess you'd say, he's like my mentor. And the first story that they got me to do was Denning died. Ray Denning died of a heroin overdose. And they said, what do you know about Denning? I said, what do I know about him? And I know quite a lot about him. They said, would you like to do a story? I said, yeah. So I wrote a feature article about Ray Denning, and I revealed that the Queensland Attorney General had given him immunity from prosecution on the proviso he turned Crown evidence against Russell on a series of armed hold-ups. And the immunity from prosecution, I had a copy of it. So I wrote the story and I coupled a copy of it to the story. Well, that was political dynamite out there, because nobody in Queensland Parliament knew about it. And why did the Queensland Attorney General give a New South Wales Crim immunity from prosecution against all crimes he'd committed in Queensland? And as I said, Denning was dead, so it was old history. But that sort of got me rolling on writing feature articles. Then I wrote an article about a little kid whose mum died from a heroin overdose. Then I wrote the story about Henderson. Then I started writing pretty regular stories, for the Gold Coast Bulletin. Mainly crime. The editor, he sort of tried to compartmentalise me to crime, justice and stuff like that, which was fair enough, because I knew about that stuff. But I wrote quite a few stories. Then my missus at the time, she hit me up. It was about 94. She said, Bernie, prior to that, David Halpin died. Like, David gave me a big kick up, and then he died of cancer. Anyway, prior to him dying, my ex-wife said, look, we want, why don't you write about, rape crisis centres and stuff like that from a male perspective? Yeah. I said, I'm not writing shit like that. How can I write about that? She said, look, competent, why don't you do that? Anyway, we had a bit of, not an argument.
Taking you out of the comfort zone.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. And she said, look, you can do it. Nah. Anyway, Colleen McCulloch was going to...
The famous author.
She was going to attend a International Women's Day meeting at the Marriott. And she wrangled a pass for me to attend, so I could do a story. I said, all right, okay, I'll go. Because I'm figuring, okay, I'll go, I'll interview McCulloch, get a story, and put it to the Gold Coast Bulletin, get paid, bang, all over Red Rover. Anyway, I'm thinking to myself, oh, well, at least I'll get a free beer and, get a free feed, I'll be right. Anyway, I go there, and it was a monster breakfast.
Yeah.
Anyway, Colleen McCulloch's there, and she's talking away. And I got introduced to this woman who was one of the organisers of the organisers of the International Women's Day. Anyway, I said, look, you know, who organises? Who is it? You know, what's the story? She said, oh, it's Zonta. I said, Zonta? She said, yeah. She said, Zonta organised it as part of International Women's Day, blah, 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 helping, you know, women all over the world. I said, what's Zonta? And she gave me a background history on Zonta. Now, Zonta, the name's taken from I think it's a Cheyenne Indian in America, where the Indian braves went out to hunt or to war or whatever. The woman was empowered to look after the old men and the kids at home and all the rest of it. That's where Zonta came from.
Okay.
The role of Zonta was to help underprivileged women in Africa, Asia, all over the world, and I guess I equated it to something like the Masons, you know, like a tight select club of well-to-do people, you know, well-to-do people in the community. So I thought, that's not a bad story. You know, I'm listening to the story, and I think, and I get a germ of an idea: Crazy Horse, Sioux Indian, Cheyenne, Little Bighorn, Zonta, and I've got this amalgamation of all this information. I thought, I can make a good story out of this. So I've put the story together, took it down to Gold Coast Bulletin, they rustled me into the women's section, and the female there said, this is brilliant. She said, yeah, we'll buy it. Good. So they buy it, I get paid, I've had free food and a beer, I'm happy. All over Red Rover. Well, about 3 days later, this woman rings me up. And she says, oh, Bernie, she said, that was a really good choice. It's the first time Zonta has ever received any publicity. We're really happy, rah, rah, rah. I said, oh, yeah, I'm pleased to hear that. Pleased I could help you, etc. She said, do you want any more stories? Well, of course, the warning light, the guard's gone up. I said, oh, I don't know. What kind of stories you're talking about? She said, have you ever heard of bagasse? I said, no. She said, well, bagasse is a byproduct of the sugarcane industry. She said, and there's a big bagasse stockpile in my niece's place, and they've suddenly become very, very sick. And they think it's from the bagasse stockpile. Well, I'm automatically thinking, ooh, asbestosis, maybe I'm on a big story here. So I said, yeah, all right. So I get introduced to Kerry and Steve Manning. Now, they moved out of their house, like they didn't sell it, they just moved out, and they were living at Kingscliff. So I went down, I got an interview with them. I walked in the flat and I've looked around the flat. I guess it was a crim attitude, you know, just automatically surveyed the soil. And I've seen this picture up on the wall of Michael Jackson and this little girl. And I've looked, and Kerry saw me looking at the photo. And she said, oh, that's my daughter so-and-so. I said, well, how come Michael Jackson? Yeah. So, well, her daughter had Kawasaki. It was a motorcycle bike. It was a motorbike. She had Kawasaki disease, which to me was a hole in the heart or something like that. Yeah. And Michael Jackson came to Australia and he'd visited all these kids in hospitals, and that's how the photo came about. So I said, look, can I take that with me as part of the story? Because I'm thinking, well, if this bagasse don't pan out, well, I've got a story there. Story. So she said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I've got that. Well, then she starts telling me about bagasse. And what it is, it's like a dust. And this guy next to him, he had a bagasse stockpile. And what he used to do is he used to use it as fertiliser on the Tweed Council and Mooloolaba Council on their lawns and gardens and so forth like that. And she'd gone to a doctor. She suffered pneumonia or signs of pneumonia and all this other thing. And the kids got sick and the old man's got sick. But when they moved away from the house, they were all good again. When they moved back, they took sick. A bloke next door had tropical fish. All the fish died from the dust getting in the pond. Yeah. So all these things that happened around this, there was something wrong with this bagasse. Well, anyway, she'd got all this information from overseas about, you know, bagasse and how it had become a compensable disease in Louisiana following an outbreak over there. So I knew that I was onto something. So I've dug up all this stuff about bagasse, a whole box and
real investigative journalism.
Oh, yeah, well, it was an interesting story because I didn't know where it was going or where it was going to end. But I knew the woman was sick. I had all the medical reports. I had all this. I had a whole heap of stuff. So I started putting the story together. I wrote the story. had all the photos. I didn't use the Michael Jackson one. I was going to use that for another story later. And I had all this stuff and all the background information, all the certificates, all the information from overseas. I had everything all nailed. Anyway, going to the Gold Coast Bulletin, I went up the phone and I said, listen, mate, I said, I've got a story. And I showed it to him. He said, Jesus Christ. He said, where'd you get all the information? I told him the story. He said, that's unbelievable. He said, we'll do a 3-page spread in this Gold Coast Bulletin this weekend. Well, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll get paid. That's good. Well, he rang late that night. It was on a Thursday night. And he said, listen, Bernie, he said, pull the story. I said, why? Because I couldn't see anything wrong with it. He said, there's possible defamatory information in the article. Yeah. Well, I knew about defamation. And I thought, well, I couldn't see where I defamed anyone. Yeah. If it's one thing I knew the defamation laws. I knew that back to front. And I'm thinking, I wonder why. So David had left the Gold Coast Bulletin and he was a stringer for the Sydney Morning Herald, the Sun Herald on the Gold Coast. And he had his own offices over at, I think it was the Isle of Capri. So I've gone over to see Dave. I said, listen, Dave, I said, I've got this story, it's about the gas, rah, 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 rah. And he hadn't heard about it. He didn't know what I was talking about. I said, it's a byproduct of sugar cane, blah, 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 blah. He said, oh, yeah? He said, where'd you get the info? I told him. I said, look, can you read it and show me where there's any defamation? And I told him about knocking it on the head. Anyway, he said, there's no defamation. He said, that's a good story. He said, do you want to get it published? I said, yeah, I do. He said, wait there. So he rang the editor of the Sun Herald. And he said, a young bloke I know, He's a young bloke I know up here, he's a bit of a villain. He said, but he could put two words together, He's got this brilliant story. He said, as long as all the information can be backed, as long as it can be corroborated, and I learnt that early in life, always back up your information. Normal journos back up it twice, I back up it 3 times. Yeah. Because
it's a good safeguard, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're going to turn and say, he's a criminal. Of course he's going to tell a story. Yeah. You're not going to get me on that. You're just not going to get me on that, you know. Anyway, what happened then is he sent it to the Sun Herald and they just grabbed it. 2-page spread in the Sun Herald that weekend. Beautiful. So, it was lovely. I've got paid, got a couple of grand out. I'm laughing. Put it to bed. Done the job by Kerry and Arati, who'd run Zonda and all that. I'd accomplished what I set out to accomplish.
And there is a feel-good side to that to journalism when you're doing something good, isn't it?
It gets better. Yeah. And I was quite pleased. I was quite happy with myself. And I felt I've accomplished something. Anyway, it was a couple of weeks later, the editor's secretary, I forget her name. Anyway, she's rang me and she said, listen, Bernie, we're getting all these letters from Queensland from people living near the sugar mills. They want to correspond with the bloke that wrote the article about the gas. What do you want us to do with the letters? I said, send them up. So send all these letters. Well, you had letters from South Johnson Mill, Mossman, all in the area. And there was one, she's like I got a mental picture. I've never met any. I interviewed them all by phone. And she struck me as a little old lady. And, she rang me up. She said, look, Bernie, my name's so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. My husband's name was Miles, and he was a truck driver in and out of Mossman Mill, and he died in mysterious circumstances. I said, oh, yeah? I said, what? And she said, he's got something wrong with his heart. It's something he'd swallowed in his heart, something dissolved. And I couldn't make head or tail of it. So she sent me down the death certificates and all that relevant data. So I thought, oh, yeah. So I put that to one side. Then I got a bloke from South Johnson Mill. His name was John Tarrar. Now, when I spoke to him on the phone, it sounded like he had cancer in the throat. You got that raspy voice. I said, look, John, I'm the bloke, you wrote, about bagasse. He said, yeah. He said, I've got bagasosis. I said, what? He said, I've got the disease bagasosis. He said, it's been diagnosed, I've got it. I said, fair dinkum. I said, yeah. So I talked to him about it. And he sent me down all his medical reports. How did you get it? Working in South Johnson Mill. Okay. Then there was someone else. There was about 3 or 4 people. Then I got, what was his name? He was a union rep for the mills up in North Queensland. And he said, look, I've got an original circular dating back to 1979, I think it was. It might have been 1970. It was one of those 2 years where the Queensland Sugar Mill and Industry had issued this circular to all mill managers to be wary of bagasse, and that if anyone complained, issue them with a breathing mask. And I thought, fuck.
They knew about it.
Yeah, they knew about it all the way back.
Yeah.
So I've got that, and that was like the golden bullet. And I'm thinking, I'm onto something here. So I've got in touch with the editor at the Sun Herald. I said, look, I've got another story. And he said, what? And I told him. And I sent down the material I'd already had. And he said, Bernie, he said, what you got to do? He said, you've got to get the other side of the story. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the first one was fine. He said, that was the family.
Yeah.
He said, this time you've got to go to the mill managers and get their views on, what they think about it. It's sweet. So I got in touch with the first bloke was Condong. I got in touch with the mill manager at Condong. Didn't want to talk to me. He said, "Oh, you're the journalist that wrote that story about me. Can't talk to you. Talk to the milling, the sugar milling industry." I talked to the bloke at South Johnson Mill. He said, "Look," he said, "as far as we're concerned, we've got the safetiest work record in Queensland history, if not the world, and we just can't have any diseases like that because we protect them. We do this. We do." I didn't say anything about the union circular I had. Anyway, he said, "Look." No, that was the other one. There was a third one. He said, "Look," he said, "I can't make any comment." He said, "Why don't you ring up the boss of the sugar milling industry?" I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Well, who's that?" I'll never forget his name. He said, "His name's John Day Marcellia." I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "You wouldn't have a phone number for him, will you?" He said, "Yeah." So he's giving me a phone number. I said, "Oh, I'll ring him up." So I got on the phone. I said, "John, is that John Day Marcellia or Di Marcellia?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Look, mate," I said, "I'm writing a story about bagasse." I said, "I wrote a story." He said, "Oh, you're the journo." Well, everybody knew who I was, but they didn't know who I was. They knew I was a journalist who wrote about bagasse, but if they'd have known I was an ex-crim, I would have been hung out in court, scored and drawn. Anyway, he said, yeah. He said, "I read your story." He said, "That's not true." I said, "What do you mean it's not true?" He said, "There's no known case of bagasosis in Australia." I said, "Well, mate," I said, "I spoke to a bloke called John Terrar at South Johnson."
Yeah.
He said, and he picked up his doctor said. He said, "No." He said, "He was never examined by our milling, the sugar milling industry's doctor." I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." Anyway, he said, "Well, look, in Louisiana, it happened out there. They had an outbreak there. They had an outbreak in Chile. They had an outbreak in Hawaii." I said, and Queensland's one of the states or one of the country's biggest sugar milling industries. How can you say conclusively that can't happen?
Yeah.
He said, "I'm telling you," what was his words? "I'm telling you that it just can't happen. It just cannot happen." I said, "All right." I said, "Well, can I quote you?" He said, "You can quote me." He said, "You can quote me to the nth degree." So I did.
Yeah.
I quoted him. He said, "It can't happen," and I had all the other evidence. But the icing on the cake was the little old lady. She's rang me up. And I'm just about to put the story to bed and send it to Sydney. She said, "Oh, Bernie." She said, "Yeah." She said, "Look, I was going through Miles's things and, effects." She said, "I found his diary." I said, "Oh, yeah, love, yeah." She said, "It's in an old exercise book." She said, "But I don't know whether you want it or not." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, is there anything pertinent?" She said, "Well, he's listed all the truck drivers that died going into Mossman Mill in the last year." And I was just about to jump through the phone. So, I want it. And I said, "Well, yeah, if you don't want it, love, I'd appreciate it." She said, "Oh, yeah, I'll send it down." So she sent it down. That was the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
So
good.
I sold the story. I got the story to the Sun Herald. They published it again.
And learning a little bit about the first part of the story. Then you got to get the other side of the stories. And,
but then I ended up with about 4 boxes of stuff on the. I could have wrote another 5 or 6 articles.
It's challenging journalism, isn't it? Because I'm as you know, my situation outside the cops, I've started off very late in my career, but at a level of journalism, and trying to understand the power of journalism, first of all, the ethics in journalism.
Yeah. Well, ethics, that's a funny word when you apply it to journalism, because it bends all the time.
It does bend all the time, but what I've found with journalism is, as distinct from police work, is that police work was very black and white. I saw it black and white. With journalism, there's that grey area. Like, do you write that story? How do you research it? But in talking to you, that you've got a really strong view on the ethics of journalism in regards to making sure that you tell both sides of the story.
And I've got to thank Chisholm, Summers and Halpin for that, because those three sort of fed the input into me And I didn't bury it. I didn't forget it.
Yeah.
I kept it there. And I thought, yeah, well, yeah, you're right. Like, you're the expert. Like, Ann Summers wrote books. She was Keating or one of Hawke's press count.
A wise person takes advice from others.
Yeah.
But you learned a lesson in prison, and sorry to take you back to your prison times, but who was your...
the old fella.
the bloke that you didn't have much respect for.
Yeah.
Billy the Tubby.
Yeah.
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 Well, I'll just start you off on
Yeah.
it. This was when you were starting to write in prison, and Billy the Tubby, you didn't thought he offered nothing to you in your life in prison or journalism or whatever, but he left a letter in your cell one day after you'd been ignoring him time and time again.
I never ever got to thank him.
And tell us the story of what he said in there.
Well,
I think it's really interesting because it taught you not just about journalism, about life.
Yeah. What happened is he used to work in the shit tubs in those days in Parramatta. They used to take the shit tubs down the back and empty the shit tubs, and the vagrants and the drunks that was their job to clean them out. Well, old Bill, he was a vagrant, a drunk or a vagrant or whatever. And, they only do 3 months at a time, maybe 6 months at the most. But, they're in and out of jail. Well, back in those days they were, not so much these days. Anyway, I get a message, listen, the old Tubby is chasing you up. He wants to have a talk here. Yeah. And I'm thinking, what the hell would he want to talk to me about? Anyway, a couple of blokes said, hey, listen, this bloke's pestering everyone trying to find you. He'll find me if he wants me. Anyway, I sort of never paid much attention. I thought, what can he? Oh, yeah, he can't help me. Like, what's a vagrant going to help? What's he going to help me with? Anyway, I go into my cell one day, and there's a letter on my desk. It's old scrawly handwriting.
Yeah.
And I pick it up, who the fuck's this from? And I pick it up and I read it, and fair dinkum, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I had to sit down and read it again. And basically what he was saying was, listen, I went to a school of journalism, International School of Journalism, blah, 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 and I'm going to offer you some advice. This is how you do things. And I'm not offering you advice as a personal advice. My friend is Darcy in Ireland, and I figured Darcy in Ireland, well, of course he was a well-known author, and his wife Ruth Park. Well, Ruth Park wrote Tell Me When the Cross Turns Over and all the rest of it. And I'm thinking, whoa, I've missed a gold mine here. And I had.
Yeah.
He got discharged the day before.
Yeah.
Never again.
Lesson in life.
Never again.
Lesson in life, not to judge people.
No, don't judge people. You listen.
Yeah.
And discern what they're saying. If they're talking shit, well, you'll get to the bottom of it sooner or later. But at least listen.
Yeah.
And listen with an even ear. Don't sort of let your own thoughts and processes come into play.
Yeah.
There was another one where this gets back to not so much judgmental, but being protective of your own writing. As a young bloke, young David, he'd been in a riot in Minda. Now, Minda was a boys' shelter in Lidcombe in Sydney.
Yeah, I remember it.
Well, he was in the riot. He was classed as one of the ringleaders in the riot. So there was 2 or 3 of them. So the magistrate or the judge said, listen, I'm going to make an example of you blokes. We can't have riots in juvenile detention centres. I'm going to make an example of it. I'm going to send you to an adult prison. So that's what they did. Well, as it turned out, I knew young David's uncle, and he was an old villain too. So we sort of had a connection there. And what happened is David contracted HIV in jail. Now, it was a sad story. A 17-year-old kid getting sent to jail because he was he shouldn't have been in the riot. I take all that. But the repercussions or the end result was pretty horrific for the kid. And he ended up with full-blown AIDS. Well, George was taking him around Australia. He was in nearly the dying stages.
Yeah.
And he said, Bernie, look, can we call in and see you on the Gold Coast? Because as I said, I knew George. He said, yeah, sure. So he called in to see him and said, you can stay for the night. You stay a couple of nights or whatever. And he said, all right. And of course, David was very self-conscious about being HIV and having AIDS. Yeah. He said, you don't mind? He said, no, I don't mind. And I gave him a cup of coffee, and he said, can I drink out of this cup? I said, mate, can drink out of what? But he was that self-conscious, He knew he was dying, but, he didn't want to spread it. I said, mate, you're sweet. And I said, listen, I'd like to write your story. Anyway, he said, yeah, all right. I said, okay. So I interviewed him at my place, and I called it, and they kept the headline.
Yeah.
I called it Dead Man Walking. And I listened to his story. It was fucking horrific.
Mm.
The punishment was over and above what was prescribed by law. He had a death sentence.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wrote about, what had happened to him and how it happened and all the rest of it. And then I wrote about the Queensland prison system. I said, look, the reality is this, is if a man goes to prison and contracts HIV in jail, then he can come back out and reinfect the community, whether he be his wife, girlfriend or lover or whoever it might be. That's a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
I said, because there is no safeguard when a bloke gets out of jail.
Yeah.
Well, of course, it hit a few chords. And it hit the then Corrective Services Minister, who was a bloke called Paul Brady. Well, the editor of the Bulletin rang me up one night. He said, listen, he said, the minister's written a letter to the editor about your article. I said, oh, yeah. He said, he's virtually bagged it and bagged you. I said, oh, has he? He said, yeah. Oh, that's nice. He said, do you want to write a reply? I said, yeah, I do. I said, I'll read his letter and I'll give you a write a reply. And what Brady had said is basically, look, the journalist knows, he's blowing wind up his arse, he knows nothing. In Queensland, we check every prisoner before they're released, and they cannot possibly come out of jail HIV and infect the community. It's just an impossibility. Anyway, I read it, and I knew that was wrong, so I wrote a letter, and basically the letter was, well, look, with due respect to the minister, and I was being, I guess, polite to a sarcastic degree.
Yeah, yeah.
I said, with due respect to the minister, because there's a window period, if a bloke contracts HIV in jail, there's a 3-month window period. Does the minister suggest that if a man is acquitted at trial, he'd be kept for another 3 months until they determine whether he's HIV positive or not? If a man is released on bail, and I went through all the ways people get out of jail, ended up in Parliament. They laughed him out of Parliament. To this day, he doesn't know what was the next criminal was a journo. So that would shock him. There's another article that you wrote, the Reap as you sow.
Reap as you sow. Yeah, that was another powerful piece.
Yeah, that was one of the most. That was one of the most emotional, I guess, minefields I've ever tripped into.
And that was about child welfare, institutional child welfare. And I just read out a passage from that article because it is powerful. The child welfare institutions used for state-sponsored childcare were the monsters of a bygone era. They are cloaked in secrecy and used to brutalise and emotionally scar children. They serve no other useful purpose. Those who suffered that institutional brutalisation under the guise of state-sponsored care continue to occupy Australian prison cells and mental institutions.
And that's right.
It's powerful stuff, Bernie.
That's 100% right. Like, with Reap as you sow, what happened there, and a lot of the women, well, a lot of the girls, but they're grandmothers now, but they're still girls. They had a reunion in 2007 on International Women's Day down at Hay, at the old Hay Institution for Girls. And a number of the girls knew me personally. A number of them knew that I knew their brothers and their fathers from jail. And they knew I was a journalist. They knew I wouldn't embellish it. I wouldn't bullshit.
Yeah.
I'd say it as it was. And they trusted me. And I guess that was the bottom line. So I got invited down to the reunion, and I drove down there, bastard of a trip across that Hay Plain, I'm telling you. But anyway, I got there. I didn't know what to expect. Anyway, I started interviewing a couple of the women, Marlene and Wilma and a couple of the others, and they started telling me about Hay and what they did to the girls. What they did to the girls in Hay is just... well, it was the same at Parramatta Girls' Home, you know.
Yeah. Well, I've known some ladies from there and the trauma that they carry.
Well, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, they told me some stories. As I said, it was one of the heaviest emotional minefields I've ever went through. And I listened to their stories, I recorded them. And there was one girl, she'd had a few beers, And she was talking, I was interviewing her, I was talking about her story. And she said, they took him away. And I didn't understand what she was saying. I said, what do you mean? She said, aren't you listening to me? They took him away. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, we might be treading in murky area here. I said, no, sorry, love, I missed what you said. She said, they took him away. And it was a baby.
Right.
What had happened is she'd had the baby at Paddington Women's Hospital.
Yeah.
And they came in and they adopted the kid out straight away. This was a woman talking about something that happened 40 years prior, 50 years prior.
Pretty tough, isn't it?
Yeah. And, the things that they, the rapes and the shit that went on in Hay and Parramatta, you think, fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you combine your life experiences with your skills as a writer, they're important stories to tell.
They are.
And it must give you some satisfaction to be able to tell those stories
Yeah.
and, be the voice for a lot of people that have been caught up in a system that...
But see, that's the trouble, Gary. People don't want to hear about crims. They want to hear about the nuts and bolts. How many banks did you rob? What did you do? How did you do this? Well, that's all they want to know.
Yeah.
They journalists. It means nothing to them.
Yeah.
I tell you a little story, and this is a strange one.
Yeah.
It happened without going into the area. My ex-wife and a friend were at a club, and there'd been an advertisement in the paper for a journalist at this particular paper. So I thought, I'll give it a shot, because I like working for myself.
Yeah.
I don't like working for a boss. So I go, I'll give it a go. So I put in an application, put in my resume, all the rest of it. And I never heard anything back. And my missus came home one night and she said, oh, we ran into that bloke from such and such a newspaper.
Yeah.
I said, oh, yeah. She said, yeah. She said, I talked to him. I said, my old man's applied for a job there. He said, yeah, I know. She said, oh, yeah. She said, but they won't hire him. And she said, why? She said, because they're scared of him. Scared of what?
Yeah.
Scared of what? Fucking words on a paper?
Yeah.
But, that's sort of... And the bottom line to that, I told that story to a radio interviewer in Canberra. And he said, Bernie, out him. He said, shame. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. No.
Yeah. Well, I think, you can... There's many ways of being scared, but I think sometimes someone that's prepared to tell the truth and without fear or favour...
They don't like that.
That is pretty scary.
They don't like that.
Any organisation gets confronted by that. Just finishing off on your journalism, just a couple of things.
Yep.
That because you should be proud of it. It's a tough industry. It's an industry where a lot of people try to make a living from or get recognition in. And in 2004, you became the first Australian ex-prisoner freelance journalist to be shortlisted for 3 journalism awards during the 2004 Queensland Media Awards, and you won 2 of them.
Yeah, that's right.
That's pretty cool.
I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
And to make it better, an old mate of mine, he's former bank robber too. We were there at the dinner. So,
yeah.
It was rather a strange setup.
Like one of the awards you won related to an article you wrote about how prisons make prisoners more violent upon release. Yeah. That's important stuff, and it's stuff that you're well schooled on to comment on.
But people don't want to hear that. Politicians don't want to hear that.
Well, sometimes the truth can confront, and if you say a system's not working, it challenges people. In receiving the awards, the judges made the following comment, and I read this out because it's kudos to you, Bernie.
Yeah.
Bernie Matthews is a remarkable storyteller with a unique perspective on something most Australians will fortunately never experience. As a prisoner who studied journalism whilst doing hard time for armed robbery and prison escapes, he has a passionate interest in open and fair reporting. He became the first Australian journalist to be admitted into the MEAA without tertiary qualifications or conventional work experience. Congratulations.
Sure. Thank you. I was pretty proud. I am proud of them.
You should be proud of it. And life is about a journey and that. And I said we weren't going to talk about it, but I think we're going to stretch it out a little bit longer. And the fact that you're going so well in journalism, you're getting on with your life. You'd been out of prison for a while at that stage, but things came unstuck
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, it's a strange story. I guess it goes back to the prison life. I was approached by a colleague from jail, and without going into all the details, I agreed to do what he asked, and I ended up back in jail. Simple as that.
Yeah. What was it? What did you get convicted of?
Supplied guns and drugs to an undercover cop.
Right. Okay. And that wouldn't have been looked at very favourably with your history.
No, I got one of the heaviest sentences in New South Wales. So I got 16 on the top, 11 on the bottom, for I think it was 750 grams of ecstasy and 3 rifles and a pistol.
How'd you feel?
Yeah, well, I guess it was collateral damage to my life.
Yeah.
How did I feel? Well, I wasn't too happy, but you know.
Were you angry at yourself?
Yeah, I was. It was stupidity, but you know, there was nothing much I could do about it. I'd done it. I'd stepped into it, and you can't wipe it off the bottom of your shoes once you're in jail.
Yeah. Well, as I said before, reading your book, I can't help but think. Yeah, I was there chanting for you to get on with your life. Like you turned it round. You were really making headway with your journalism career, with the awards that you got. And is that something that's just from the brutality of what you went through in the early days? It's just something that's part of you?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's in my DNA. To understand why, where, how, it all comes back to jail. It all comes back to the brotherhood or the network, or call it what you want. And there's people that have been under adversity, especially in places like Grafton and Katingal, a special bond is built. It's not just a normal jail bond, it's a special bond. It's like a brotherhood in the cops, you know. And that was what that's what I grew up with. That's what I matured with. And, of course, when he asked me, look, can you do me a favour? Well, of course, I had no hesitation.
Yeah, because it was a code that you
that's
had.
right. And it's stupid, because it cost me another 11 years of my life.
Yeah.
But, I made the move, and that was it.
And you were in a relationship at that stage?
Yeah. I'd been married 1 year, and I got pinched on her birthday the following year.
That would have gone over well.
Oh, yeah, I went over like a lead balloon.
So, back in prison, how old were you at this stage?
I'm 72 now. I'll be in my 60s.
How did you find prison, the second stint?
Well, people always ask me that. I've got a stock standard reply. I said, listen, when an old villain like me goes to jail, what they do is they call you Pop, they give you a job in the library, and they give you a pet mouse. And, and basically that's it. You get left alone because you've already made your mark. You did the hard yards, and blokes that don't know anything about the hard yards know, this bloke has sort of, he's been in things that we haven't been in as far as jails and punishment's concerned.
So with your reputation came a degree of respect with the other crims?
Respect? Yeah, I guess you'd say that, yeah.
Did the system, and you are looking at it from a different way because you're young and angry when you were in the system first up, and now you're a little bit older and wiser. But had the system itself changed?
Yeah, dramatically.
In what way?
Well, number one, particularly in New South Wales, they are unbelievably concerned about their public image. They don't care about anything else. They call themselves corrective services officers. They don't correct anyone. They're prison guards. They're not corrective services officers.
Yeah.
They're prison guards. And the community corrections, they're parole officers. Yeah, there's all these semantic somersaults with the name changes and that to enhance their portrayal to the general public to say, hey, listen, we're really the good guys. We're keeping the barbarians at the gate. Well, wrong. Hey, there was a big history. You're trying to bury history. You can't bury it because I'm still alive. You might be able to bury it when I die because there won't be too many people that remember what happened years ago. But just one point. For 33 years, the New South Wales Department of Corrective Services sent people to Grafton and belted them and assaulted them and perpetrated violence on them for 33 years. And it was all done with the okay from head office.
Yeah.
It all came unstuck at the Royal Commission. People want to forget that. Well, you can't forget it. That's part of your DNA, pal.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's what you came through. And I can see the emotion. You talk about it now, and we've been talking a long time, but it still comes across.
But I got sidetracked. You talked about the change.
Yeah.
And there's a distinctive change. Back in the old days, you had the line. You had blue on one side, green on the other side, never the twain should meet. Like in the old days, the screw could get pinched, get charged for talking to a crim.
Right. Okay, so there was a big divide.
Oh, there's a big divide.
Yeah.
And that made the crim a lot stronger, and I guess that made the screw a lot stronger, or the prison guard a lot stronger.
Yeah.
However, these days, what you've got is you've got a culture of, look, let's try therapy and let's do anger management and let's do drug therapy and let's do this and let's do that. Now, it might work for some people, but they're pushing it down everybody's throat so they can turn around and say, look, we're solving the drug problem, we're solving this and we're solving the recidivist problem and all the rest of it. They're not. Yep. They're not. It's all a facade. And what's happening is you've got this culture where crims are falling into, it's easy jail. There is no hard jail anymore. There is no fear of jail. You talk to a 16-year-old kid on the street who looks like hitting a boys' home and say, listen, you could go to jail next week. So what? There's no fear there whatsoever. Whereas back in the 60s and the 70s, whoa, I don't want to go to jail.
So what do you think's the best system then?
Well, mate, look, if you want to stop recidivism, okay, you want to stop.
Well, that would be everyone's ideal, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Yep. You want to stop recidivism. You can't stop it with me. I'm too old. I'm dyed in the wool. You've got to start at the beginning. You've got to start with the kids. You've got to turn them away from boys' home. You've got to stop this bullshit of hard line. A kid stole a car, so we'll send him to jail for 2 years. That'll stop him stealing cars. Yeah. Listen, idiot, instead of sending him to jail, why don't you come up with some program where the kid has got to mow lawns or look after a pensioner's house for 6 months. He's out in the community, he's doing something worthwhile, but you're teaching him something. Instead of throwing him in jail where he's just going to become worse. They don't look at that. They don't look at an alternative. The simple way is I throw him in jail.
So you'd say the way to change things, to stop that recidivism, is in the early days.
Oh, of course. You've got to begin at the beginning. And the beginning is boys' homes, juvenile institutions. A kid is like pure plasticine. You can mould it. Yeah. You can squeeze it and mould it. You can't do that with an adult.
Yeah.
So, you've got a better chance of changing the kid from sleeping in the beds I've slept in for 28 years behind the walls than you have with people like me.
Right. So 28 years, that's how long you spent inside?
Yeah, all up, yeah.
How many jails?
Four in Queensland and 5 in New South Wales.
So you've been there, done that, seen that. Yeah. Look, Bernie, you've been out of jail for how long now?
2 years.
2 years?
Or just under 2 years, but getting on to the 2 year mark.
Confident you're not going back?
Oh, mate, I'm too old. Mate, I'm flat out walking. I can't jump on the bank counter anymore. Besides, there's no money there.
There's no just a tip. I don't think it's worth robbing the bank these days.
And cybercrime, mate, I'm flat out with my laptop.
Okay, so it's past your by.
I'm past my use by date.
And how do you see your life play out from here?
Well, mate, I guess I'm on the downhill slope. That's a foregone conclusion. I don't know. I'll probably put another book together if I can, because I really want to put the transition from jail to journalism. I really want to get that in paper. Well,
as the listeners heard during the podcast here, you've got a passion for journalism, and I love your writing style.
Thank you.
It's really powerful, and it's powerful because it comes from the heart. Yeah. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah. You have either lived this life or you haven't, and to tell the story.
You can't bullshit. Like I've seen crims come out and they tell you all these weird and wonderful stories. You listen to it, what a lot of garbage, Yeah. And then you hear other ones and you go, oh yeah, that's spot on the money. Yeah. And usually the spot on the money is the older crim who's been through the ropes, who's been through the mill. And he's got no reason to lie. Yeah. He's got no reason to tell you a yarn.
Yeah, you don't need to talk yourself up. What's the purpose of talking yourself up?
What's the point? There's no need.
Yeah. Well, I think the listeners will agree with me. The 4 hours or over 4 hours that we've spent with you has been very, very interesting. And you've taught me a lot, and it's strange sitting here as an ex-cop speaking to an ex-crook. And Yeah, hearing your side of things from your side, literally the other side of the fence, and it's been good. Thanks for your honesty, and all the best with your future, Bernie. I think everyone deserves redemption at some stage, and it looks like you've turned your life around, and let's hope you've got some peaceful years ahead of you.
Thanks for that, Gary.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Next week's guest on I Catch Killers is a person who's been convicted of murder. He's out of prison now. He's a professional boxer. He has a particularly interesting story to tell, where all is not as it seems. I hope you can join us next week on I Catch Killers when I talk to Caleb Baker.